Good morning. Today we're continuing our reading of The Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. This recording is made with permission from Little Brown Books for Young Readers. Chapter 68, The Station. At the edge of town, where the houses stopped and the countryside began, there was a small train station. Two platforms sat on either side of the tracks. Humans and robots were standing around waiting for the next train to arrive. Nobody paid any attention to our robot as she calmly marched past. When Roz was safely out of sight, she slipped into the woods where Brightbill was hiding. The goose opened his mouth to speak, but the station bell started ringing. Speeding down the tracks was a passenger train. A whistle blew, the train gently braked, and a minute later it came to a smooth stop at the station. Passengers burst out of the train cars while others stepped aboard. The first 9 cars were reserved for humans and had wide windows and comfortable seats. The only robots allowed in those cars were the service robots, who brought food and drinks to the human passengers. All other robots were confined to the windowless car at the back of the train. "Where's it going?" whispered Brightbill as he peeked out from the bush. "The sign says this express train is going to the city," whispered Roz. The goose turned to his mother. "We have to go past the city to get home. This train could save us a lot of time. We should hop on." The robot turned to her son. "I do not think that is a good idea. It is too risky." "Ma, I watched you walk through town and no one even noticed you. We'll be fine. Let's follow those robots into the last car. I'll find a hiding spot and we'll be in the city before you know it." Roz had some questions. "How large is the city? Do you know where to go? What if we get lost?" "Relax, Ma. My pigeon friend Greybeak lives there. She'll be happy to help us." A voice called out from the loudspeaker, and the last couple of passengers hurried out on the platform. "I'm going to check it out," said Brightbill. With a quick flurry of wing beaks, he fluttered from the bush and onto the roof of the last train car. The goose lowered his long neck and looked in through the open door. Then he looked back and waved for his mother to join him. A whistle blew and Brightbill waved faster. Roz had little choice, so she slipped out of the trees and marched onto the platform. "In here, Ma!" Brightbill pointed down to the doorway beneath him. Everything about this situation made our robot nervous. Her survival instincts were tingling. Roz looked up at her son on the roof, and then she stepped through the train door. But before Brightbill could flutter in behind her, the door slid closed, and the train began to move. Chapter 69, The Train. Our robot felt something like panic as the train pulled away from the station. She wanted to break the door down, leap out from the train, and find her son. But what could Roz do? She had to act like a normal robot. She had to pretend like nothing was wrong. The train car's interior was a long, windowless room filled with rows and rows of robots. The robots were all facing forward, all standing still. If not for their softly glowing eyes, you might think that they were statues. Some of the robots were perfect and new, but most had some scrapes and dents. But none more than Rosum Unit 7134. Roz walked down the aisle and stood in the last row, and the train started to accelerate. Faster and faster it went, until it reached its cruising speed. Then it hummed along the tracks, occasionally swinging left or right as it snaked around a curve. With no windows, Roz could only wonder how far she was traveling. She could only wonder about the scenery outside. Mostly, she wondered about her son. Was Brightbill okay? How would she find him? Would they ever see each other again? Of course they would. Brightbill was smart and resourceful. The goose would simply follow the train tracks to the city. Then he would find his pigeon-finned Greybeak, and she would help them reunite. Roz had to just stay out of trouble. Time crawled by. The robots gently swayed in the motion of the train. Finally, there was an announcement from the loudspeaker. "Next and final stop, Center City Station. A whistle blew, and the train braked and slowed and came to a smooth stop. The door slid open, and the robots filed out. Chapter 70. The March Through the City. The main hall of Center City Station was enormous. Wide columns stretched up to an arched ceiling. The whole place was bustling with humans and robots. Everywhere, everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. Everyone except Roz. There was our robot, standing still in the station while commuters hurried past. She was trying to calculate her next move, and she had to think quickly. You see, a normal robot would never loiter here for long. Roz needed to do something. Anything. And when a crew of Roslyn robots marched past in single file, she could think of no better plan than to join the end of the line and pretend to be one of them. She followed the crew through a set of doors, and suddenly they were outside. The city was a blur of activity. Automobiles hummed down the streets. Robots marched along the sidewalks. Humans talked and laughed and shouted. Buildings towered overhead, and above them, airships buzzed across the sky. Airships. For a moment, Roz was dreaming again about how easily she could get home with an airship, but reality came crashing back when a white triangular airship darted over. It was gone in an instant, disappearing behind the rooftops. But that was all it took for the robot's survival instincts to flare. Were the Reccos searching for Roz or going about some other business? Roz tried to focus on her immediate surroundings. She was still marching behind that crew of robots. With each step, she grew more nervous that they'd notice her tagging along. She wanted to break away. And as they started heaving and shuffling through a crowd of tourists, Roz slowed and stopped, and the robot crew continued on without her. Now Roz was on her own, but she didn't know what to do or where to go. When in doubt, Brightbill had always guided her north, so a robot set off through the city in that direction. While marching northward, Roz passed beautiful boulevards and architecture and gardens and art. Yet she had to ignore it all. She had to act like a normal robot, and a normal robot would never wander the city admiring beautiful things. Wherever Roz looked, she saw normal robots concentrating on their tasks and nothing else. If they ran errands, delivered food, swept sidewalks, cleaned windows, fixed machines, some built glorious structures and did more jobs than you can possibly imagine. Most walked on two legs, but some rolled on wheels or slided up and down the sides of buildings on tracks. The city was a glittering modern metropolis where humans lived in luxury, all thanks to the tireless work of robots. Roz was marching when the sunlight faded and the city lights brightened. She was marching when the humans went in for the night and the robots continued to work. She was marching when the sun came up and the humans filtered out of their buildings. A new day began in the city, and there was Roz, marching north, blending in, anxiously hoping her son would appear. Chapter 71. The Observations. Sunlight sparkled off the skyline. New buildings were constructed. Old buildings were taken down. Cargo ships docked in the harbor. Delivery trucks unloaded crates. Bright signs flickered with advertisements. Robots worked behind the scenes. Children played in parks. Adults ate and drank at outdoor cafes. The city pulsed with energy. A wild robot observed it all. Chapter 72. The Police. A pair of police robots stood on the sidewalk while foot traffic glided past them. Their heads swiveled back and forth as they scanned the crowd with their glowing eyes. The police looked menacing, but they sounded friendly. Whenever a human walked by, they'd say, "Have a nice day," in a perky voice. There were a lot of humans walking by, so the police kept up repeating their words. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. Our robot was not having a nice day. She was alone in the city. She was worried about her son, and she wanted to do nothing with the police. But she couldn't avoid them. If she turned suddenly, she might draw attention, so she kept her eyes forward and calmly marched along with the other robots on the street. Roz may have looked calm on the outside, but on the inside, her thoughts were scrambled. Were the police dangerous? Did they work with the Recos? Was she about to get caught? It seemed as if the police were watching Roz. Their eyes lingered on her for a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and then they continued searching the crowd. Our robot felt something like relief when she made it pass without incident. She went on her way, just another robot on the street, and those perky voices gradually faded behind her. Have a nice day! Have a nice day! Have a nice day! Chapter 73, The Pigeons. In the very heart of the city was a great swath of greenery, the old park. It had rolling lawns and flower gardens and dense wooded areas. It had lakes and ponds and fountains. It had playgrounds and benches and miles of cobblestone paths. It also had pigeons. Thousands and thousands of pigeons. The city pigeons witnessed things you wouldn't believe. Nothing shocked them. They certainly weren't shocked by robots. So when Roz marched into the middle of the park, the pigeons there weren't troubled at all. She approached a flock that was about 100 birds strong, all cooing and strutting across the cobblestones as if they owned the place. But as Roz stomped closer and closer, the pigeons scuttled out of the way to let her pass. However, Roz didn't pass by. She stopped and glanced around, and when she saw that she was alone with the pigeons, she started speaking to them in the language of the animals. Hello, pigeons. My name is Roz. The pigeons clucked their heads, which meant, this robot actually speaking to us? Yes, I am actually speaking to you, continued Roz. I am searching for my son. He is a goose named Brightbill. Have you seen him? For the first time in a long time, the pigeons were shocked. Several of them fluttered away from the talking robot, but most were too curious to leave. One pigeon was so curious that he strutted out from the flock and right up to the robot. Let me get this straight, said the curious pigeon. Your name's Roz, and you've got a son named Brightbill, who's a goose? That is correct. I can't believe it! The pigeon flapped her wings and turned to the others. You guys, this is Roz from Greybeak Stories, remember? The flock began cooing excitingly. You've heard of Greybeak, said Roz. Everyone's heard of Greybeak, said the pigeon. A while back she started telling stories about a goose whose mother was some kind of wild robot. We all thought she was joking, but I guess not. She was not joking, said Roz. But I have lost my son, and I do not know how to find him. Perhaps Greybeak could help? Do you know where she is? I hate to tell you this, Roz, but Greybeak is dead. All the birds lowered their heads. You know, life ain't easy for us pigeons. We only live a few years out here with her lunky. But we were especially sad when we lost Greybeak. She was one of the best. The others cooed in agreement. I am sorry for your loss, said Roz. I wish I had gotten to meet Greybeak. My son was very fond of her. The pigeon gazed up at the robot with a steely look in her eye. Any friend of Greybeak is a friend of ours. If Brightbill is lost, then we're gonna find him. She turned to the others. You heard me, flock. Hit the skies and tell every pigeon you see to start searching for a goose named Brightbill. At those words, the flock erupted into flight. Only the robot and the curious pigeon remained. By the way, call me Strutter, said the pigeon, fluffing out her chest feathers. It's very nice to meet you, Strutter, said the robot. Thank you for searching for Brightbill. What can I do to help? You can help us stay and put. If you wait in this park when we'll return with your son. Don't hide or wander off and make us go searching for you. Oh, and another thing, Strutter added. Stay away from the park ranger robot. He spends most of his time taking care of the grounds, but he's always on the lookout for troublemakers. The pigeon gave a quick salute to the robot. Then she joined the search for Brightbill. Chapter 74, The Sky. Hours passed, and the sun set in the west. More hours passed, and the eastern sky began to glow. Roz spent that whole night in the park, waiting for Strutter to return with Brightbill, but there was no sign of them. In fact, there weren't any birds in the park at all. Roz couldn't let those thoughts distract her. She needed to stay alert. The park ranger robot had seen her once or twice already. Now she heard his footsteps wherever he went. Was the park ranger robot following Roz? Had he noticed our robot's unit number? Would he report her to the Recos? Roz took a pathway into the woods, trying to escape the ranger's view, and that's when she heard familiar voices calling from the sky. "Where are you, Ma?" said Brightbill. "Come on out, Roz," said Strutter. Roz turned toward the voices, but saw only leaves and branches. Brightbill and Strutter were flying somewhere above the woods. She wanted to call back to them, but the park ranger was still trailing her. Instead, she followed the sounds of their voices as they glided over the treetops. But then came a new sound, a buzzing sound. It grew louder and closer. Air started blasting down from the sky, and when Roz looked up, she saw a white, triangular airship floating above her.